This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today and I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Here are your top stories. Tensions in the Sudanese capital expected to rise with a major protest against the military takeover set for this Saturday. Chinese President Xi Jinping to push for multilateralism in his video link address at the G20 Summit. And we update you on the diplomatic row between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia. Let's begin in Sudan, where protesters are planning mass demonstrations later today against the seizure of power by the military. The military takeover has sparked a chorus of local and international condemnation, including pressure from the US, UN and the African Union. Thousands of civilians have taken to the streets in recent days and dozens have been wounded in clashes with security forces. Several pro-democracy activists have been arrested as well. Well, thousands of Sudanese have already taken to the streets this week, with at least 11 protesters killed in clashes with security forces. And Al Jazeera is reporting that the military has relieved several diplomats. Musab Mohsin Ibrahim has more now from Khartoum.
The people in the street was rejecting and refusing what's happening in Sudan, and all the people and international people were rejecting this procedure in Sudan. Today is the big day for the million protest. But what's happened last night, there was the general commander of Burhan was released 6 diplomatics, 3 of them the ambassador of Emirates and ambassador of Turkey and the ambassador of the South Africa. And they released the direct manager for the international television and TV. They released him yesterday, and the agency for news they released yesterday. Today all the people, they went from many different parts, but they're not gathering in one part. They will go out from many different parts, and they closed the bridge last night, and there was a lot of the forest security and soldier in all the streets.
Elsewhere, Chinese President Xi Jinping will speak via video call at the G20 Summit, which gets underway on Saturday. Beijing says he will call for true multilateralism.
The group of 20 nations is a major platform for international cooperation. It should uphold true multilateralism, carry forward the spirit of unity and cooperation, and seek common ground while resolving differences. The group should jointly face challenges like fighting the pandemic, restoring the world economy, promoting inclusiveness and sustainable development. China is willing to join hands with all parties to make the summit a success.
Well, on the sidelines of the meeting, US President Joe Biden met with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron for the first time since a spat over a US security pact with Britain and Australia. The two leaders agreed to explore making arms export rules more effective. Hermione Kitson reports from Rome.
He met with the French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, this was an important meeting because it was the first time the two came face to face since the AUKUS row in September. That was, of course, when Australia scrapped a plan with France in favour of one with the US and the UK for nuclear-powered submarines. Now, after the talks this afternoon, the US President conceded that perhaps he could have handled the situation a little bit better.
What we did was clumsy. It was not done with a lot of grace. France is an extremely valued partner. Extremely. And a power in and of itself.
The US was not the only party at stake, as President Trump said. And now what's important is precisely to be sure that such a situation will not be possible for our future. Stronger coordination, stronger cooperation.
Well, CGTN's Caroline Malone tells us more about the new security pact that has strained relations between France and the United States.
There's a rift to be dealt with at the G20 Summit over the US and UK's trilateral deal with Australia, known as AUKUS, which includes nuclear-powered submarine technology. The US is sharing its nuclear propulsion capabilities with an ally for the first time in more than 50 years, which will enable Australia to develop a new fleet. The trio will have to work to repair relations at the summit with European leaders, including France, which had its own diesel-powered submarine contract with Australia cancelled. French President Emmanuel Macron recalled ambassadors to Australia and the US in September over deception between allies. The AUKUS deal is also part of continued US focus on Asia.
The relationship between the United States and ASEAN is vital for the future of all 1 billion of our people. Our partnership is essential.
China protested AUKUS back in September. Beijing said the deal seriously undermined regional peace and stability, intensified the arms race, and undermined international nuclear non-proliferation efforts. President Biden has characterized the relationship between US and China as one of competition and rivalry, as world leaders head into G20 meetings. Caroline Malone, CGTN, Washington.
Well, staying with our international stories, Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati is expressing regret over Saudi Arabia's decision to expel the Lebanese ambassador and ban imports from the country. This comes after a Lebanese official criticized the Saudi-led coalition in the war in Yemen, saying the Houthi rebels were defending themselves. Saudi Arabia on Friday gave the Lebanese ambassador 48 hours to leave and decided to halt all imports from the country, citing security of the kingdom. Lebanon's prime minister said his country is committed to good relations with Saudi Arabia. He called on Arab partners to put the diplomatic crisis behind them. China is ramping up measures to contain its latest wave of COVID-19 infections on the mainland. Officials say 378 local cases have been reported over the past 2 weeks. The new wave has affected 14 provinces. The situation in Beijing and 5 other provinces is stable. China is now speeding up its booster shot program and is vaccinating children between the ages of 3 and 11. The vaccination of this age group will be completed by the end of this year. COVID-19 vaccine mandates are popping up across the United States and facing resistance from many, including healthcare workers, students, and first responders. But most legal challenges are failing. Karina Huber has more on why.
Protesters gathered to voice their opposition to a COVID-19 vaccine mandate that went into effect in New York City this Friday. All city workers, including firefighters and police officers, are now required to have had at least 1 dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Those who refuse can be forced to leave without pay.
Obviously, we've given people a lot of time, first in the voluntary phase, then in the vaccinate or test phase. It's time to keep moving.
The head of the main union representing firefighters has encouraged his unvaccinated members to defy the mandate.
The UFA at this time will explore all avenues to protect our members. We will work with the MLC and the other unions to fight this mandate and keep this a personal choice.
New York's largest police union filed a lawsuit to halt the mandate. It was rejected by a New York state judge. What's happening in New York is a microcosm for what's happening around the rest of the country. Cities and states are increasingly mandating workers get vaccinated. Lawsuits are being launched in response without much success.
The vast majority of these lawsuits are failing. So the vast majority of mandates are being upheld.
Jennifer Pyatt works with an organization that has been tracking legal decisions related to COVID-19 vaccine mandates. She says only 4 out of 36 mandates have been struck down. Courts are upholding a state's right to implement vaccine mandates using a 1905 Supreme Court decision as precedent.
Called Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the case was brought forth by a Lutheran pastor who objected to a vaccine mandate during a smallpox outbreak. The court ruled in favor of the state, saying no one has a constitutional right to refuse vaccination.
So courts are relying on that case in large part and saying it's the same situation here. And in fact, some courts are saying it's even easier now because of exemptions that are being required that were not provided, back in Jacobson's time.
In Jacobson's time, there was a medical exemption, but no religious exemption. Most of the vaccine mandates today include both loopholes, making it exceedingly difficult to argue that vaccine mandates violate an individual's constitutional rights. This is giving cities and states the confidence to impose more mandates. Karina Huber, CGTN, Warwick, Massachusetts.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has authorized the Pfizer COVID vaccine for emergency use in children as young as 5. It is the first vaccine approved for younger children in the United States. It will still be administered in 2 doses, but at a lower dose than that used for individuals older than 12. Children between the ages of 5 and 11 make up nearly 40% of cases in kids. Officials say vaccinating younger children is critical to keeping schools open and bringing the nation closer to normalcy. Authorities at Uganda's Entebbe International Airport have pushed back against claims that passengers entering the country are experiencing hours-long delays over COVID-19 tests. Uganda imposed mandatory coronavirus testing for all arriving passengers. Each traveler is required to pay $30 for a test. Leon Senyange tells us more.
The mandatory COVID-19 testing for all incoming travelers started last week. However, some arriving passengers say they had to wait for hours or longer for their test results. 5 PCR test machines with a capacity to test 300 samples per hour have been installed at the airport. Results are supposed to be back in 2 hours. The airport authorities, however, say recent social media posts over the delays are over-exaggerating the problem.
We had a few passengers who had not filled in information online prior to coming to the airport, which caused the delay. There were also a few others who had challenges with payment, who did not want to pay. They had issues over payment, and all that created a little bit of scuffle, among other teething challenges.
At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, Uganda closed its own international airport for close to 6 months. It was later reopened in October last year, and the airport has been getting steadily busier with a daily average of 1,900 passengers. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent on Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudan braces itself for more tensions with a major protest against the military takeover set for this Saturday. Chinese President Xi Jinping to attend the G20 Summit via video link. And we look at what Uganda is doing to enhance its wildlife conservation efforts. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, transparency in Tanzania's mining and gas sectors inspiring confidence in investors, according to a new report. And in sports, we get reaction from Egypt as Liverpool's Mohamed Salah becomes Africa's leading goal scorer in English Premier League history. Well, let's begin in Sudan, where protesters are planning mass demonstrations later today against the seizure of power by the military. The military takeover has sparked a chorus of local and international condemnation, including pressure from the United States, UN, and the African Union. Thousands of civilians have taken to the streets in recent days, and dozens have been wounded in clashes with security forces. Several pro-democracy activists have been arrested as well. Well, now for the very latest on the situation there, Musab Mohsin Ibrahim now joins us live from Khartoum. Musab, thank you for joining us. What can you tell us about the build-up towards that planned major protest against the military takeover in Sudan?
Well, what you know about the military over everything, the people, they went for the protest, asking for their rights and asking for democracy, asking for rights. So most of the people today, they went out asking for their rights because they wanted the Vice President Abdullah Hamidok to get back and hold up the transmission government, and they're asking
We're unable to catch up with Musab. We will try to get him later on. Musab Mohsin Ibrahim joining us live there from Khartoum. Well, Mubarak Ardol, who is the official spokesman for the Forces of Freedom and Change, which is a coalition of 10 rebel groups, spoke to the press about the ongoing political unrest in Sudan. Let's listen in.
As a group, we did not meet with Hamdok, but yesterday I learned that groups, individually, are trying in different ways to bring their views closer to the return of Hamdok again as Prime Minister and the formation of a government of technocrats. We have no objection to this, but our only condition is that the government be independent technocrats. Until the Prime Minister can control it, in the party government, you as a Prime Minister cannot take any decision regarding any of the ministers because you fear the political incubator or the party he belongs to. With regard to the position of the US government in stopping the aid, which is $700 million, if we come to the account during the transitional period, the United States was the only country that fined Sudan more than $400 million. They fine us more than $400 million for crimes that we did not commit, but rather committed by the previous regime. We cannot allow him to buy our political decision for $700 million. We call on the organizers of the demonstrations to stay away from violence, and we call on the security forces to deal with them peacefully, in order to spare the blood of the Sudanese. And this is very important, because we do not want more wounds, tears, and loss of lives. And we call on citizens to abide by the emergency law, because the emergency law is in force now. And denying this fact will not be beneficial to the stability of the country.
Well, world leaders have gathered in the Italian capital, Rome, for this year's G20 Summit. It is the first in-person meeting among leaders from the most advanced countries since the coronavirus pandemic. Climate change, the global economy, and COVID vaccines are set to top the agenda. well. For more on the G20 summit, let's now hear from Hermione Kitson, who joins us from Rome. Hermione, what is the latest as the summit gets underway in the Italian capital?
The G20 summit here in Rome officially kicked off this morning with world leaders gathering at the convention centre for the official welcome from the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi. This is the first time they're all meeting face to face, of course, since the beginning of the pandemic. The key areas of discussion today will be the pandemic and also the global economic recovery. The G20 health and finance ministers actually met yesterday afternoon in Rome to discuss these topics, and they say they want 70% of the world's population vaccinated against COVID-19 by the middle of next year, and they convened a special task force to ensure that this will be achievable. Key areas of debate are really how to deliver more vaccines to developing countries who need it most, as many of the richer countries are now in their booster phase of vaccination and many poorer countries are still in their initial stages of immunization.
And Hermione, what should we then expect to dominate the agenda tomorrow?
Okay, tomorrow what will dominate talks is climate change and sustainable development. It is really hoped that this weekend there could be some clear commitments made ahead of the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow next week. The United Nations Secretary General says there needs to be more decisive action taken by the G20 nations this weekend ahead of the United Nations summit next weekend. Next week there seems to be a lot of division still about how to phase out coal and also how to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees Celsius. So a big weekend of some very important discussions this weekend. We'll just have to see in terms of what kind of commitments these world leaders can agree to.
All right, Hermione, thank you very much for joining us on Africa Live. Hermione Kitson speaking to us live from the sidelines of the G20 summit in Rome. Well, it's time for us to take a short break here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Ethiopia's Tedros Ghebreyesus on course to serve a second term as head of the World Health Organization. And we look at what Uganda is doing to enhance its wildlife conservation efforts.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, the World Health Organization's Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus is set to be appointed for a second term in May 2022 after no other candidates were put forward for the post by the WHO member countries. He was the only candidate nominated by 28 countries. Here is CGTN's Enoch Sikolia with more details.
By the end of the deadline day, only one name had been fronted by member states for the position of Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus. Nominations were done secretly through confidential envelopes that were sent to member states. The WHO boss got the support of France and Germany, among other European Union members, and 3 African countries, Botswana, Kenya, and Rwanda. Germany and Spain maintain that strengthening the UN agency in the wake of the pandemic must continue with full and undivided commitment, saying the organization needed strong, pragmatic, and visionary leadership. The 56-year-old biologist has worked as a field-level malariologist in Ethiopia before leading a regional health bureau and then joining the government, working his way up the ministerial ranks. In 2017, he became the first African to head the powerful UN agency. Tedros has been the public face of the World Health Organization since the COVID crisis began and is relatively popular due to his role in steering the organization's efforts to coordinate the pandemic response. Tedros continually rages against the me-first approach in vaccine distribution, maintaining that these actions will only prolong the pandemic. He has been urging countries to do it all to bring the pandemic under control. He recently apologized to victims after a devastating report on allegations of rape and sexual assault by workers sent to fight Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo between 2018 and 2020, found that 21 WHO members had committed such abuses.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what was done to you by people who were employed by WHO to serve and protect you. I'm sorry for the ongoing suffering that these events must cause. I'm sorry that you have had to relieve them in talking to the Commission about your experiences.
African diplomats in Geneva have described Tedros as a friend of Africa who has done a lot for the continent. Enoxikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
South Africa is battling a devastating avian influenza outbreak that has so far killed thousands of endangered seabirds along its coastline. The disease appears to be concentrated amongst seabirds along the western and southern province and has affected endangered Cape cormorant colonies. Now, conservation experts are concerned this highly contagious viral disease could severely impact the threatened African penguin population. CGTN's Travers Andrews tells us more.
South Africa's endangered Cape cormorant population is in danger. It is facing an avian influenza outbreak like which the country has never seen. Over 11,000 Cape cormorants have already died as the disease continues to take hold of breeding colonies. Seabird Rehabilitation Centre, SANCOB, has been leading efforts to contain the outbreak.
We had to unfortunately put down symptomatic birds because we cannot treat the disease. And then it's only been in the last month that Cape cormorants suddenly became affected. And we're getting more and more Cape cormorant calls coming in. And then on further investigation at the colonies, suddenly there were these very large numbers that were getting sick and dying. And that's where we are at the moment, that in some of the colonies up to 500 birds are dying every day.
The disease appears to be concentrated in populations of wild seabirds and is mostly affecting the Cape cormorants. Some endangered African penguins have also been affected though, and the species remains vulnerable to the current outbreak.
In 2018 we had a similar outbreak and penguins were affected and died in South Africa and as well as in Namibia. And although it didn't have a colony level outbreak that was very severe, there was still several hundred birds that died from the disease. This year we've had a few cases in penguins, mostly in carcasses that have been found, and very small numbers at the moment, but we're still very afraid that it can cross over to the African penguin, and that could really cause a big problem if it's as infectious in the penguin as it has been in other species.
For now, most efforts are centered on separating the infected birds from the healthy ones in order to mitigate the spread of the disease. More than 5% of South Africa's entire Cape cormorant population has succumbed to avian influenza in just 1 week, and conservation officials are concerned more are dying by the day. Now they plan to open a new quarantine facility in Cape Town to determine which birds are infected with the disease and need to be euthanized. Ramzan News, CGTN, Cape Town.
Now, Uganda is celebrating the life and times of its once oldest chimpanzees by raising awareness about conservation of the apes. Zakayo died in 2018 at the age of 54 after battling stomach complications. Isabel Nakiria has more on that story.
Zakayo's two wives, Amina and Ruth, and son Shaka are part of this community of chimpanzees. They are keeping the legacy of Uganda's once famous chimpanzee alive.
Zakayo was an interesting chimp, and every time you would look at him, you would feel happy. But it's sad that he died when I wasn't in the country. I just watched the news on TV, and that's why I'm here, so that I can just enjoy looking at his family.
Zakayo played a legendary role as the oldest chimp ever in Uganda. He was known to be caring. This monument was constructed in memory of Zakayo, who lived here for over 4 decades. Visitors to this park remember him for his fatherly figure and friendliness. Another chimp has been named after him, and animal keepers say he behaves exactly like Zakayo. Many visitors who came to the zoo were fond of Zakayo. Zookeepers say they miss his sense of responsibility to the younger chimps.
Zakayo had made our work easy because he used to adopt the new ones who are being brought. And now that one made our work of integration easier because each individual that we could rescue, it could become very easy for that individual to get acclimatized and cope up with a new environment.
Zakayo, the once dominant male chimp, was an ambassador of conservation. He died on 27 October 2018, and annually the zoo remembers him the entire week. Activities to mark the week include tourists participating in feeding of the chimps. Visitors to the zoo are encouraged to buy souvenirs with pictures and names of the chimpanzees, and the proceeds go to the conservation of the primates. There are just about 300,000 chimpanzees left in the wild globally. The Entebbe Zoo says more efforts are needed in protecting chimpanzees so they can live as long as Zakayo. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Entebbe, Uganda.
Let's take you to Nigeria now, where blood meal is a delicacy. When animals are slaughtered, the flesh is cooked and served as a source of protein, while the blood is considered waste. But many Nigerians are using the blood as both nutrients for their farm and as food for their families. Here is more now from CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam.
49-year-old mother of 6, Mary Pambot, preparing one of her family's favorite delicacies, blood meal. It's fresh animal blood collected from the abattoir, spiced and cooked. For Mary and her family, it's a cheap substitute for costly proteins.
We eat blood as a meal. The reason we do this is because we can't really afford meat. That's why we cook it and eat. Once we eat it, we have eaten meat. We eat it because it is sweet, since the animal itself is a healthy one.
The Nigerian government puts the country's annual beef consumption at an estimated 360,000 tons. But according to the Bureau of Statistics, there are about 83 million Nigerians who live in poverty and can barely afford meat. So merchants like Rufus Daniel will dry and repack blood meals for low-income earners. He makes about $500 profit monthly from sales.
Someone introduced me to the business and I see it's okay. There's amount, there's value in it. There's money in it, so that's what motivates me to keep on doing it. 1 kilo is 300 naira. It's naira. Then one bag, that big bag, like I said, is 35,000 to 40,000 naira. And then 1 ton is 150,000 naira.
But how safe is the consumption of blood meal?
Blood in whatever form should not be recommended. For eating. I wouldn't recommend. But the truth is, some of these animals on their own have a lot of diseases. So even before you eat them, even in the course of processing, Ebola came, we talked about all sorts of monkeys here and all that, and all sorts of animals. Lassa from rats and all.
Apart from eating it, farmers use blood meal as high-nitrogen organic fertilizer to grow their plants. Health experts warn that if taken in excess, it could result in high deficits of iron in the body and cause serious health complications. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, staying in Nigeria, where the country's creative industry is valued at over $100 million. It now boasts artists who are turning locally sourced materials into artistic treasures. Some of these works were on display at a recent exhibition in Lagos to showcase some of the best made-in-Nigeria furniture and other home accessories. CGTN's Deji Bademosi now reports.
Every item here is made from locally sourced materials. Most of the artists who are showcasing their work at the Eco-Design exhibition are young women. 26-year-old Elizabeth Awodu is one of them. She ventured into furniture making last year, and now she's showcasing this unique furniture set made from cut-out pieces of reclaimed woods.
Everything we work together, we put roots together, we put life edge, we infuse it, the abnormality, the curve, the uneven edges. Those are what we actually admire. This is what we actually inspires the whole design. So I just look forward to showcasing more of these designs to the world at large.
This piece of furniture is made out of a popular traditional textile material, locally known as ashoke in southwest Nigeria. Beyond its use as a ceremonial outfit, the artist is demonstrating its other utility value by designing contemporary armchairs with the material to create regal pieces that showcase the pattern, color and texture of the cultural Yoruba fabric.
We realized that ashoke was underused. It's just after a wedding, you just throw it away or you just put it in a box. And we wanted a way to show our culture while using things that are still modern and in use, and we use around the house and things like that. That's how it started, and it's blown our minds as well.
While the taste for foreign furniture still endures, there's a growing demand for local crafts, and this exhibition is put together to make a stronger case for made-in-Nigeria designs.
This really showcases what we have, and we have so much. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many people doing amazing things. So we want to really encourage people to buy Nigeria, and we have a lot, and we should be proud of what we're producing here. No, I think the government should really try to support and encourage. I mean, the people are doing things, but we need to really have more product designers. But by having that, people can actually export their products out.
For the art sector in Nigeria, the much anticipated future may just be here, with these innovations by the young and vibrant generation. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Right, and here's what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Transparency in Tanzania's mining and gas sectors inspiring confidence in investors, according to a new report.
In the desert country of Namibia, an unlikely fashion movement is amassing growing interest. Laurentius Gebart, or Lou the Vintage Guru, as he is known, is a leading figure in the so-called Afro-Dandy movement.
The more you look good, the more people will take you seriously.
Together with his friends, he searches out second-hand pieces of clothing, remolding them into bold and exciting new vintage fashion statements.
In Africa, for the Africans.
Lou is putting African fashion on the map, but he also has a deeper purpose: to make style and dignity accessible to the poor.
We have a slogan that says, "Dress cheap, look rich."
Time for the business now. A report on transparency in Tanzania's mining and gas sectors shows increased accountability is inspiring more confidence in investors. The 2018-2019 report was unveiled at a ceremony in the nation's commercial capital, Dar es Salaam. Mining licenses were also awarded to Tembo Nickel Corporation, which will mine the world's largest development-ready nickel sulfide deposit. CGTN's Isaac Lucando has more.
A round of applause to celebrate the granting of a mining license to Tanzanian nickel mining giant Tembo Corporation. Formed earlier this year, the company is a joint venture between the UK's Kabanga Nickel and the Tanzanian government. About 2 million tons of nickel will be produced, potentially earning the government some $7.5 billion and hundreds of locals employed in the mines.
You are representing millions of Tanzanians. Make sure you do what is right, that you do your work with the highest standard of professionalism to ensure that we get everything we ought to get as a country.
The concurrent release of the 11th edition of the Transparency Report in Tanzania's extractive industry paints a fairly positive picture when it comes to accountability. Investors like Kabanga Nickel, whose mining operations will produce nickel, cobalt and copper metals, believe their ventures will flourish because of it.
We are delighted to be partnered with the government of Tanzania to develop this strategic nickel project, which will create shared value for all stakeholders. This landmark partnership, based on shared objectives and trust, has been set up between the Tanzanian government and Kabanga Nickel to ensure the economic benefits from Tembo Nickel, our partnership, will be shared equitably.
Tanzania's latest extractive industry transparency report points to the government receiving over 9,000 license applications in the minerals and gas sector. Of those, 5,000 applications were successful, with 249 existing licenses being revoked for failing to meet regulatory standards.
Mining accounts for about 5% of Tanzania's GDP. The government hopes that by doubling its contribution to the GDP to 10% by 2025, around 1.2 million people who depend on the mining sector will benefit.
Through a controversial review of Tanzania's mining laws in 2017, the government now gets a 16% stake in all mining projects in the country. The government argues the changes were made to benefit the majority of the country's 60 million people.
We have put in place a good system of reaping financial benefits, with each side getting a 50-50 split in profits. If you look at the distribution of earnings that we have in place, the government gets 51% and the investor gets 49%.
Last year, gold exports from Tanzania were worth some $2.9 billion. With the granting of new mining licenses, the government hopes similar earnings can be made with nickel. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Now, Mara Phones is the first and only African-made smartphones manufacturer based in Rwanda. Since inception in October 2019, Mara has reached more than 40 nations across the continent and the world. CGTN's Girum Chala is in Kigali and sat down for an exclusive interview with Mara Phones Managing Director Eddie Sebera.
Eddie Sebera, thank you so much for talking to CGTN. In October 2019, your company, Mara Phones, came to being, and about 40-plus countries were beneficiaries of a phone made in Africa. Since 2019, I'm sure you have done a lot of things, and challenge must be there as well. But where are we now?
Oh, thank you so much, and always a pleasure to have a conversation with CGTN, because this is not the very first time that we have a thought and sharing our journey. You're very right, it's been 2 years. I'll call it a roller coaster of the good and the bad and everything that's happened. Not just for us, you've all seen what's happening around the world with this inevitable situation of COVID. But when you look at it, despite that, it's been a very interesting journey for us. We have now at the end of what we had planned to be the piloting phase to present a proof concept before we ramp up. Last time when we had a conversation, if I recall, we had already created a relationship and visibility of our product up to 40 countries. As of end of September, we've actually reached 76 countries.
COVID-19 has disrupted almost all economies across the world, and Africa is not really different, or your company as well. But what were the lessons learned throughout the challenge that you've passed through, also the opportunities you've got?
The lesson learned as well through this disruption of our economies in the supply chain, in the logistics and all that, it came very, very obvious to us, which was something that we knew, is we need a certain interrelationship with other African countries, not just in the sense of a market, in the sense of let's produce and consume our product together.
It's true that African economies must start consuming products from within the continent so that growth can be registered through an African effort. But then again, what do you say is the 1 or 2 standards that your company has set for Africa to build confidence on your smartphone products?
The standard, you see, the best way to see it is nominal. When you look at statistics, when you look at what we've produced and the return, it was below 2 to 3%. That is the international standard. Meaning that if you can be able to produce and have such a rate of return for after-sales services and repair, that means your quality is up to international standard. That's number one. Number two, when I look at 76 countries, the largest, not in terms of quantities only, even in terms of visibility, is the rest of the world. It's not just Africa. That says, that again confirms that quality is prime and the standard was not biased.
Asia in general, Eddie, and China in particular are now becoming leaders in the smartphone business and also in innovations in that sector, talking of 5G from China, for instance. So what is the lesson that Africa or companies like yours from the continent can learn from the Chinese experience in general terms?
Producing in Africa, we are not running away from Asia, first of all. They are the biggest, they have scaled up, and they're extremely good in what they are doing. We want partnership. We want to work together. Look at the digital transformation we have in Africa, despite how successful Asia has been in Europe and the rest. We've only have 17% to 20% smartphone penetration. How do we digitalize our economy? There's no way at that rate. That means as much as they've been successful, they've done much more. They need more people to come on board, more partners. Why not Africa? Is to say, let's go there. Let's supplement. Let's accompany them. Then we'll move from 20 to 25 to 30 to 40 etc. The right way of saying that is, it's time for Africans to stop being shy.
Now, representatives from China and South Africa have held a virtual conference on a joint project to build the world's largest radio telescope. The SKA Science Bilateral Video Conference deliberated on the relationship between the two countries in relation to the development of the Square Kilometre Array project. CGTN's Yolisan Jamela has more details.
The SKA is a global project to build the world's largest radio telescope. It's located in South Africa and Australia. When it's completed, it will cover over 1 million square meters. It will also help scientists seek answers to fundamental questions about the nature and origin of the universe. Since its establishment, the project has unveiled new research programs, educational initiatives, and collaborations to train the next generation of scientists. According to the Science and Technology Department, the project will deploy thousands of radio telescopes and enable astronomers to survey the sky thousands of times faster than any system currently in existence.
The purpose of this project is not only to develop the network of VLBI-capable radio telescopes across the continent, but also in development in human capital development, transfer of knowledge and technology, and bringing science opportunities and development to these countries.
South Africa and China have been working together on this project. In 2019, the two nations signed a memorandum of understanding that saw the Astronomy Institute of China partnering with South Africa on the SKA Project Exchange Program. It's a program that includes a skills exchange program that will see young scientists working in each other's countries. This video conference is part of information sharing based on that agreement.
China and South Africa has a very good relationship. And also, we have to thank to GD for your good effort to promote all the progress in the SK area. China and South Africa not only can cooperate in SK construction engineering, but also can cooperate in science research. Last year, we organized a video conference for science case from both sides. Scientists just exchange ideas each other and cannot form any cooperation proposals.
This year, we've seen important progress. The Council of the SKA Observatory made the landmark decision to proceed with construction of the SKA. And if that continued, that persistent progress by the project continues to be achieved, it is in no small measure due to the outstanding support from China.
The Mega Science project is expected to be completed by 2050. Yudison Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Right, and here's what's coming up in the sport. We get reactions from Egypt as Liverpool's Mohamed Salah becomes Africa's leading goal scorer in English Premier League history.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours?